Hi there, Chris here with MuseGrid. Let's take a look at building some other buttons here. Now we're going to look at two sets, the big square buttons and the big circle. So let's drag those onto the page here and let's take a preview of these buttons. So you can see that they have this nice effect here with this drop shadow, and even on white they show up nice and clean because they've got this glow around them. And we have this hover effect where when you move the mouse over they appear to drop down onto the page. So let's see how they're built. Let's take one of these apart. So we have a couple of different parts in here. We have a text frame, we have an image, and we have a state button. Now the state button, we've applied a couple of effects. We've added a drop shadow. We've used the blue to make it just a little bit brighter than using just black. At 8% with a 15 pixel blur, 45-degree angle, so it's at a slant, a vertical slant there, and a diagonal slant, sorry, and at a distance of 15 pixels. We're also using a glow on here at an opacity of 8%, same color blue, and then with a blur of 8, and that creates this appearance. If we go back to our preview, that gives us that nice edge using the glow, and then the drop shadow combined with the glow creates this nice lifted effect so that it feels like it's dropping down onto the page when you hover over. Now we're using a text frame again, and rather than trying to position the text frame like this, we've sized the text frame nice and neatly so it fits nicely into the button there. And we know that then between the different states, that even if we change the text, we're going to have that correlation between the different layers, so we don't get that little pixel movement that you sometimes see in buttons. Then we have an image, it's not a background image, it's an actual image on the page, and we just move that into place. We can see here, there you see the smart guide showing up to tell us that it's in the center of that button. Let's move it to about there. And that's how that button is put together. Now the great thing with this is that we can change this text easily. And with the button being, with the image, being an image rather than background image, we can just use replace image. And let's say go down to a different image. We're using an SVG in this particular instance, and it will automatically take on the dimensions of the image frame there. And we can just iterate now using Alt and drag, and we can choose a different background image, place image, go and choose a different SVG now, and we can see that we get that nice clean button. And let's say let's change this to search, and we'll change this to reports. And there we have these nice big buttons, and let's preview these now. Go to preview and refresh. We can see we have these nice buttons with that nice glow and drop shadow effect, and they're really nice and easy to edit. Now similar to these buttons are the big circle buttons, so let's take a look at those. Just drag those onto the page, and let's hit preview. And we can see with these buttons, when we move our mouse over, we have this nice blue circle showing up, and the icon turns white so that it stands out on that blue then. That could be any color you want. Let's see how these are put together. Now again, we're using a state button, and inside of there we have a circle, and we have our text frame at the bottom here, and then we have an icon on top. Now it's important to note that this is an image icon, but this is actually a PNG, not an SVG, and you'll see why that's important in a moment. So the state button has actually got the transition applied to it, and because we've applied the transition to the state button, it means that whatever we put into that button will be affected by the transition of the state button, so we don't have to add individual fades to each item. So that's a nice little tip to work on, to apply the transition to the state button, and then anything you add to it will take on that effect as well. So the circle here, we're just going from this grey colour to the blue, but that could be any colour you want because you can change it with the fill. So again, by using the Muse tools rather than Photoshop, you've got a lot of control within Muse to make changes quickly. So we pop that into the state button. Our text frame, again, we've made it fit nice and neatly in the frame so that we don't get that little pixel jump that you get sometimes if you haven't aligned things up perfectly. So you saw that in the big squares, how we made sure that it fitted nice and neatly. And then the icon here, we'll pop that in the middle there. And let's go to our preview here. And we can see that we have that effect happening. Now, the reason why we used a PNG is because what we want to do is we want to, instead of using two different images for the hover state, we want to actually change this icon color. We can actually do that in Muse with a nice little technique that you may be aware of or may not. So again, this only works with PNG files. It may work with GIFs and JPEGs as well, but you haven't got the transparency. So we're using a PNG, not an SVG. So we're using a PNG. We go into our effects, and we can see that we have we've added an inner glow, because actually this PNG file is actually black, but we're using an inner glow, and we've set it to this grey. We've set the opacity to 100, the blur to 250, and tick the inner glow box. Now when we go to our rollover state, if we have a look at that effect now, we're using the white color, we're using the opacity 100, 250 on the blur, and the inner glow again, which in effect changes its color. So we could choose anything we want here. Now, because we're applying, let's change this color to, let's say, there we go, nice bright button. And because we're using that effect, we can now have control over its color. So let's refresh this now. Now we can see that we can change its color. So that's a really useful way of modifying the color of a PNG in your button styles here, so that you can get that nice effect happening with just one image rather than using a couple of different images. So that's how we created those big square buttons and the big circle buttons. So let's move on to our next button set.